Hello and welcome to episode 91 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I am your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is Markhawkman, who is grounded due to weather. He's currently distracted.
Yeah, it's actually been snowing here. It's actually been snowing here quite a lot, but not quite that hard. Although this region, people don't know how to drive in snow, so people take off it for a snow day, even though there's like half an inch of snow.
I've lived in areas like that. You know how that goes. And also, we have our brand new $2.3 million model of the latest Greendragoon.
I'm actually only worth 2.1 million. And they kind of cut corners.
It's depreciation. All right. Well, we actually don't have very much news. There hasn't been a lot of Foundry stuff going on other than the introduction of the top 3 system, which we covered, I would say, pretty well on the last show. Maybe more well than we even had dreamed. But at least we all had a lot of fun and found a very, very unique mission out of that. So the other news that I have is there have been some bugs that have cropped up recently with the Foundry. We've had some people reporting some pathing issues with their maps after publish, we should say, because that's when pathing is even calculated. Hopefully for us, we'll be able to look into those. Could be map related, could be, I don't know, it could be like the thing I was experiencing with your mission, Greendragoon, when I first tested it, is that my bridge officers kind of refused to go through the door assets, the opening and closing door assets.
Yeah, pathing can be a really tricky thing.
When I was playing that mission I'm going to be doing a review for later by JohnnySnowball, I actually did notice a pathing issue. Is that it only affected one of my buffs, but when it happened, the buff just like froze in place and just stood there like an idiot.
Yeah, and I think people were reporting a few things like that. But then again, you know, the one I had on Greendragoons, the next time I played it, there was no issue.
Yeah, and it's one of those tricky things where sometimes it can be user error, just the way they're using assets or something, and a lot of times it can be like a bad publish. So oftentimes a good recommendation is if you are noticing an issue where it doesn't seem like the pathing is calculated correctly, it's worth doing a republish.
Now, the strange thing that people have been reporting about my mission, Land of Hope and Glory, is that at a certain point, their bridge officers and NPCs are falling through the floor. And I haven't seen that one in quite a while.
Are you triggering the floor?
I am, but that's the one where I put an invisible floor down there that's always there. So I don't quite know what the issue.
In JohnnySnowball's case, he did this system where, he put in a whole lot of things where there is a console next to a door. You push a button on the console to make the door open. Well, for the very last one of those on the map, when I went up to it like the rest of them, pushed a button on the console, went inside, then afterwards, I realized that one of my buffs had gotten somehow stuck on the console. She wasn't stuck inside the console. It's like she just bumped into it and stopped moving.
Pax says we lost audio.
We are still transmitting on our end.
You guys hear me fine, right?
I think Pax may just be having.
We can hear each other.
Yes, I can confirm that we are transmitting audio.
I'm not seeing any video on the stream.
Stream looks good on my end.
I unmuted it, and I'm not hearing anything. Refresh. Okay, yeah, refresh helped me.
Yeah, we seem to be coming through on my end.
All right,
And I can see
letting
the
him
stream.
know.
Okay.
Now I can. I couldn't before,
Yep,
but
switch open.
All right, well, that'll be a chunk of time to cut out in the edit.
yeah. And he says he got his feedback, so.
Yeah. The stream looks good on the upload side. Great frame rate, bandwidth stuff.
Maybe it's just a hiccup on the Twitch browser end or something.
The internet is a crazy, crazy place.
It is full of crazy, crazy people like us. So the next bug, and I cannot remember if we talked about this last time while we were on the air. We definitely talked about it at some point. I just can't remember if we were broadcasting / recording. The searching for author or searching by author for Foundry missions doesn't seem to be working quite well at the moment. My experience with it is that you type in an author's name, hit search, nothing comes up. But then if you delete that author's name and search again, just hit the search button, then it will come up and do the search properly. And
I've also found that if you type in the author's name into the mission title, it'll work fine.
And then another thing we discovered is that if you're in a team and you try and search, and then another person pulls up the search interface on their end, it will pull up what that first person searched for.
That one's just plain weird.
I remarked on the forums that I thought maybe that was a feature, not a bug. But it's probably a bug.
Foundry searching.
And, well, let's see. One of the bigger ones right now is it seems like, and I haven't tested this or anything, I'm just relying on tweets and what people have bug reported, says that stars are not showing up in custom space backdrops. I'm not talking about star fields, but the actual star that you can tell it to generate on your space map if you're doing a custom space backdrop.
Hypo mentioned that. Actually, I think his actual username is Hyper Limited. But I made a space map from scratch just so that I could test that, and stuck in a star just to be like, okay, here's how to do it right. I couldn't do it.
So it wouldn't appear to you either?
I know I've done it before, but I mean, I stuck it in there and moved it so it's like close so you could see it really nicely. Had nothing else in the sky file, and it wasn't there.
That's definitely
it seems like the geometry is not drawing, essentially.
Not drawing, or it's being placed outside of, like behind the backdrop, or there's some sort of Z issue. I can tell you the lighting problem where the sun wouldn't generate any light has been an old issue that's been around for like 2 years now.
Yeah, it's been going on for a while.
Well, that's just it, though, is that I took out everything except the stars that you can't remove from the backdrop, and I still didn't get anything. I mean, I know from experience that certain things that you put in the sky file as backdrops will conceal everything behind them. Big offender there is the one that from the Briar Patch. That particular sky file thing has to be in the back and everything's layered in front of it. Otherwise, you won't see anything that's layered behind it. Actually, you know what? Even in that case, even that backdrop wouldn't hide the star. It wouldn't hide those. It would hide everything else.
It's been my experience that, obviously, before this was happening, the sun seemed to shine through or be in front of just about everything.
Well, it'll definitely be a case
if
that
you had one on there.
Yeah, it isn't already, to make sure it's posted in the bug forms so CryptoFrost can get it logged.
Always good advice.
Actually, Cryptic Frost did respond to the thread started by Hyper Limited, so yeah.
And, sometimes even if he doesn't respond, I imagine he probably sees it.
He's usually pretty diligent. No, I mean, no guarantees about if or when this will get fixed, but at the very least, he's diligent about making sure they get logged.
Yeah. Another one that some people are seeing is that when they import a mission, so that they can make a copy of it, essentially to do something new with it, if they close it and reopen it, like the entire mission gets wiped clean. No maps, no costumes, no nothing.
This is actually how it normally functions. You have to save in order to get it to stick. It's always worked that way.
Can you close something without saving?
Yes. Because it doesn't realize that you've made any changes because you personally didn't make the changes. So it lets you close out without actually saving. So it's just one of those things when you duplicate a map, make sure to go in and save it properly.
Okay, well, maybe we can reply to that thread and tell them to import it, save it, and then see what happens and see if it still has a problem.
Because I remember that happening way back when I duplicated part 1 to start part 2.
All right. Well, let's see here. Actually, one thing that we can talk about is, I believe there is. Somebody told me. Yeah, here it is. There is a Foundry weekend coming up that is actually not a weekend at all. It's Foundry Week, which is next week. So March 2 to March 6. So Monday through Friday, at least that's how it is on the calendar here. You earn a choice of reputation marks by playing Foundry missions. Obviously, this means the ones that qualify for rewards. So obviously, that's going to mean an uptick in plays on Foundry missions, especially for probably ones that are in the top 3 system.
Yeah, and I
mean, so if you got a mission that you're working on and you're almost ready to go, get ready to go quickly and get it out there and get some buddies and get it qualified, and you're going to have a lot of plays.
Yeah, and in general, it's a great opportunity for people who enjoy playing Foundry missions to get extra marks out of the deal.
Absolutely. Because who among us doesn't need a few more marks, right? Of course, on this show, we have all the marks we could ever want, right?
I'm fine with the one we got.
I don't even get a laugh for that one. It's a horrible one. Okay, let's move it along to what we've been working on. Dragoon, start us off.
So I have actually been diving in headlong into part 3, and I brought pictures. I've mostly only been working on one map so far, but as far as the build is concerned, it's mostly already there. As you can see from the picture, this is actually a recreation of a section of the ship that you actually saw in part 2, except that in part 2 it was on fire and red alert and being shot up by you and your crew. Obviously, since that time, they've had a chance to pick things up. The ship is no longer in danger. But I thought this is a great opportunity to connect it back to part 2 in a place that you've been before. Here's the security office, which is just down the hall from the astrometrics lab you saw earlier. I even have the entrance to the Jeffries tube down there at the far end where you come through. It's kind of been interesting because I couldn't find like any stock maps that matched the layout I needed. So I ended up having to do all of this custom and then try to get it as close to what was mostly a stock map. So here's the hallway outside the security office. It's just kind of fun trying to go through and trying to pick up all the details of what the cryptics version looked like, and so I can match it. This is there's actually a little bit of section you didn't get to go through before, which I can add on since this is all custom. So this is further on down the hall. And finally, this is actually a new piece. This is a locker room where I've actually already got put in Corin's team, who are getting changed after their mission. And just some cool stuff. I haven't fully figured out how everything's going to flow and where all the stops are going to be, but this is kind of one of those. I was pretty sure I'm going to put this in here somewhere. So it's been a lot of fun.
So where are you at on the story? Have you figured out where it's going to go?
So I figured out the whole arc before I published part 1, so I had some idea where it was going, and it's still going in the same general direction, but there are changes and additions that I made in part 2, which I now have to account for in part 3. For instance, there was no security team, and I got a couple of ideas I want to explore, but I haven't figured out how I'm going to relate them back into the arc. So the first half of the mission is a little more fuzzy, and I got to figure out a few details. I might hit people up for ideas, but I kind of got to figure out a good way to do it without like spoiling it for everyone.
You've also been redoing your Midas array a little bit, haven't you?
Yes, and unfortunately, I don't have a picture of it. But I will.
Not one loaded in anyway.
No, not one loaded in, but it'll be. I'll tell you what.
You showed off a picture on Twitter, which was pretty sweet, I gotta say.
I'll break protocol here and actually attempt to load it up real quick. I can find it.
Making interesting looking space stations and things can be a little bit difficult because we're actually far more limited in the assets we have there in space than we are on ground. That's for sure.
All right, so here's my new attempt at the Midas array.
Can you talk a little bit about how you built it?
We don't really have pieces of space stations except for the Borg junk. Yeah. So, you can't like add a solar panel to a Federation space station to make it look slightly different. You are stuck with a single unit for the space station, and that's it.
Unless you can find a space station with a little solar array that you can hide the rest of the station inside something.
Yeah, I tried that, and the stations ended up being too massive to hide. So I actually ended up using different colored platforms, because we have the, I think they're labeled as weapons platforms, and some are lighter, some are darker, so I use darker ones for solar panels.
Yeah, that would work, I suppose.
Lighter ones for...
When I did my Okampa New Year thing, I actually came up with a trick where I take an asteroid that has one of those little mining dome things sticking out the side of it and embedded the asteroid into something so that just the dome would be sticking out.
Yeah, in my case,
which I guess would work similarly if you wanted to make that the top of a space station or something.
My solution was kind of just to make it absolutely huge.
Yeah, that was my question. I was going to ask, how big is this thing?
It is pretty large. The original Midas array was never given anything in context to tell us how big it is, but it's probably quite a bit larger than they originally envisioned. But hey, it's a pretty impressive array, so I figured I can fudge the scale a little bit.
So, I'm trying to remember how much time you spend on this map in the original.
The map itself?
Yeah.
I don't remember. That was
in your mission. Because, the advice I always give to people is, if you're going to go to the trouble to make something like this, something that looks this awesome, make sure the player has time to look at it and, play around on the map. So if you go back at all to redo any of this, make sure they get the chance to really fly around it. I don't know, maybe they have to make some modifications to it or something before they go on the mission, or I don't know, something to do on that map.
Yeah, I can say the new array itself took me an evening to do. I don't know how long the original map took, because there were like so many iterations that I went through, because it was my part 1 and I was figuring everything out. There was like an original version of the Midas array that looked nothing like it does currently in the mission. So this is actually the 3rd iteration of the Midas array.
How many assets did you use?
This one is about 150.
Yeah, that looks about right.
I don't think won't break the budget. It's a little tricky because the Midas array shows up in part 1 on that transitional map, where you go through the wormhole and then into the asteroid field and fight some aliens.
Yeah.
I'll have to check and make sure I'm not going to blow my object limit.
When you first tweeted this picture, I thought, we should have him, put down all of the asset coordinates so people could build themselves if they wanted. And then I saw you tweet about 150 assets, and I'm like, oh my god, never mind.
Yeah, well, so incredibly would be a large file, but it might still be useful.
Be incredibly painstaking though for you to put down on a spreadsheet or something, and painstaking for somebody to recreate. So
I think it would be notably easier for me to describe how it's built versus the exact dimensions, because I can tell you things like there's like 5 stacks of horizontal transwarp gates, angled in, with about 0.5 depth difference between them. Stuff like that would be so much easier.
Yeah. With certain assets, the main thing you would need to know is the precise distance that you need to set between the assets, and the actual specific locations are less important. Like for one of my missions, I made a floor by taking several of these glass display, well, not display cases, but they're those floating shipping crates that you see on some of the science-themed maps. Well, I embedded them in the floor so that you were standing on the tops of the crates, and I tiled them so that they made a checkerboard sort of glass floor. The trick with that is that you have to set them at the exact distance, and knowing that, you can easily throw out like 20 or 30 of them and make a floor out of them.
Yeah, no, Drogan, you were able to...
That's definitely why you need a... Sorry, what?
I was going to say, you were able to recreate that Jeffries tube just by looking at it.
Oh, yeah, I mean, and that was much less complicated than this, though.
It only seems complicated. There's a lot of duplication.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, I like what you said, just by looking at it.
Well, yeah, and you were describing it to me as well, as I was trying to recreate that. Obviously, you ended up with, I think, a lot more of the Jeffries tubes in your mission than I did. Well, no, maybe that's not true.
Well, I mean, once you have one section, you just copy paste until you have.
Oh yeah,
all.
Absolutely. It was really easy to duplicate and create a whole sort of network of Jeffries tubes. All right, Mark, what have you been working
on? Still working on that Otha patrol mission. I actually haven't spent a lot of time working on it lately, but done a little bit. I actually set my original goal was to finish it in one afternoon, but I realized that it was actually going to take a bit more work than I originally thought, because I wanted it to be something interesting and not as boring as one of the actual patrols that you would expect to find when you're actually doing a patrol in one of the cryptic system maps. Because stuff like patrolling the Marrow system is really short. You warp in, you scan some things, you shoot some Orions, then you leave. The only interesting aspect of the story about the Marrow system is what the Orions are trying to steal. They're there to steal anti-chronotons, because the Federation has detected that for some unknown reason they exist in that solar system, and while they're believed to be the result of some sort of cataclysmic time-based event, the Federation really has absolutely no clue what's creating them. They just know that they're dangerous, so they're trying to collect them and make it so that they're not just floating free in the solar system. But the existence of the anti-chronotons is the only thing about the solar system that's interesting, or the mission in general. So, anyways, but basically what I decided to make it interesting is to make it so that what you're doing is you're trying to help a group of Borg that want to be members of the cooperative get away from the Borg that are at Otha itself, but you also kind of sort of have to convince them to stay away from this other planet, because the Klingons use the other planet for farming, and they don't want the liberated Borg to mess that up. And I disconnected.
Oops.
It wasn't due to inactivity either. I have no idea. Just random.
Well, sometimes that happens.
Yeah, it happens. You kind of gave me an idea as I was thinking about this. With this top 3 that's coming out, you mentioned the word patrol. And so that got me thinking of, if someone wanted to, there's all kinds of systems that don't have anything there right now as far as the Foundry top 3. So, why not make a simple-ish mission? Obviously, I'd want it to be good quality, even if it was still simple. And, make it essentially like a patrol, Don't make it too complicated. Make it quick to build, fairly quick to play, get some friends, and get it to qualify for rewards, and there you go. You got a mission at one of the systems.
Yeah, that was actually the reason why I picked Otha, is because it's a location that people fly past reasonably often. But, at least KDF side, there are no missions there for the top 3.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good transition to what I've been working on. The first thing is that I got one of my missions republished, which is Straight Through the Mirror, which I built for the one of the previous Foundry challenges, the Mirror of Romulus challenge, where you had to come up with a story about the Mirror Universe Romulans. It's actually a Romulan KDF mission, but one of the things we noticed when we were playing around to do the live play on Saturday was there's almost no Foundry missions popping up in the top 3 for KDF. There was one we found at the what was the name of that system? Donatu. So now there's at least 2, because I got mine republished. It's up at the Hunod system in Ada Eridani.
Yeah, unfortunately, the only actual system or mission I have KDF side that's like an actual mission that I've already published is something that requires you to talk to one of the chancellors in the Great Hall to actually start the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually has, I wrote into the plot a specific reason for this, so cutting that out so that I can move it to a space location, I'd have to rewrite a large part of the story, so it doesn't seem like a good idea.
Can you just move it to a discussion over subspace?
Sorry, you broke up a little bit there.
I just said, could you move it to a discussion over subspace versus going to see him in person?
I suppose that might work, yes. Although, what happens is you talk to one of Jim Pock's aides. He gives you some special command codes to access a transwarp destination that the Chronos transwarp gate normally doesn't send people to, then you go to the console next to the transporter room on Chronos, put in the codes, and then use that to transwarp to the Gamma Quadrant. And I just can't think of a good reason why I would, unless you can we use the transwarp gate in Omega Leonis?
No, we can't use the gate itself.
We can't use the gate as the door?
But you could just send them to X system that has a Klingon transwarp gate in it, and just say there's make a space map.
Invent one.
Okay, well, I suppose that could possibly work.
But it's a good overall discussion, though. We can go off on a tangent on it. Given that this top 3 system seems to be a very good way to get plays, and, we're Foundry authors, we want people to play our stuff. Would you consider moving missions that aren't starting out in points of interest in the universe? Would you consider moving the start points to take advantage of it?
Well, I mean, I know a lot of people put their missions on Earth space dock for convenience, and it's something that always kind of bugged me. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those missions could be moved out into the universe, especially ones that are not set on Earth or Earth space dock. Yeah. I know in more than a few cases they're missions that have us going and talking to an admiral in person, which could, in theory, be just as easily done over subspace from wherever the actual mission takes place. As far as, like, say, for instance, me having a mission that's set out on some planet and then deciding to move it to, like, say, Vulcan to get more plays, I'd rather see the mission start where it makes sense to start.
I think that's kind of where I fall as well. I mean, most of mine that are set on the social maps have a reason to be set there. Like, I've got one that requires you to go to Starfleet Academy and then to actually enter the mission from Earth space dock, and there are story reasons to do that. And then I've actually got 3 more on the KDF side that are holodeck missions. So those don't make any sense to start from out in sector space.
Yeah.
Unless because we don't have any. When
I wrote the mission, go ahead.
We don't have any. We have a Federation holodeck that has a Foundry door that you can use on Starfleet Academy. We don't have one on the Klingon side that I'm aware of. So I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but I could build a Klingon space station and a Klingon holodeck that you could go into and have the door out in sector space. Say, let's go to this system and use the holodeck on such and such space station, and do it that way. That's kind of a flimsy excuse.
Do we have any Foundry doors here on Grinalda Station?
Grinalda Station. I don't remember.
Okay,
you say no?
I'll double check. I saved a notepad document because, remember, a while back I went and made a list of every Foundry door that it exists anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, not necessarily by name, but by region. Okay, what did I save it under? Anyway, so it said, KDF has drastically limited where we can do doors.
Drastically, yes.
And that is definitely high on my list of things I would love to see improved in the Foundry, is a much better selection of doors for KDF.
I've been subtly and hopefully politely poking Cryptic over Twitter to try and see if we can get something done about that. Who is it? The Cryptic EQAH, and I always forget who actually runs that.
That's Farktoid.
That's Farktoid. Okay, he's been saying that he's been going around and testing. I assume he's talking about the new map that he's been going and testing the points of interest. And so I tweeted him. I said, wouldn't it be great if more of those were Foundry doors?
Yeah, because the Klingons have next to nothing as far as Foundry doors because they used to be limited to such a tiny space.
Yeah.
And we don't have any Foundry doors in any of the later high-level areas like Tau Dewa or the Delta Quadrant or the Solanae Dyson Sphere.
No doors at all, Fed side either.
But yeah, just
those would be much useful to have.
Oh, I don't remember where I put the file.
But in any case, while you go search for that, the other thing I've been working on is continuing my revamp of my Romulan mission series that I made 4 years ago. Been working with Pax to kind of tie it in with his Valley of the Shadow missions. So it's going to become a mission for Romulan Republic captains. And so I've been working, I think I'll probably just have to go essentially map by map once I figure out what the overall story changes are going to be. And the very first map is actually changing. I've started work on it. It's changing from you go talk to a Starfleet admiral in an office on Starbase 39. And basically, this was years and years ago. So I just used a roped off section of old ESD for this map. And now I'm building an office on what is essentially going to be a Romulan world of some kind. What I have in my head right now is that, okay, so this is set several months after Seela's disappearance. She was abducted. Obviously, we find out what happens to her later on in Delta Horizon content, but for when this mission is set, we don't know what happened to her. She was abducted by a strange ship. We can conjecture Iconians, but at this point, we don't know. With that power vacuum, all kinds of chaos in the Romulan Star Empire. And I theorize that a lot of their former worlds would break off. Some would petition the Romulan Republic for entry. Some might even petition the Federation for entry. I think there's even a mission about that. One of the old cryptic missions that got removed, possibly. And then some would go independent, stay independent. So this is going to be one of those independent worlds up by Starbase 39. And so you're going to meet with a Riemann admiral there, one of the Republic guys. And he's going to start giving you your orders instead of a Starfleet admiral.
Well, one thing that I always think of whenever people start talking about, what about the state, I guess you could say, of the various worlds from the former Romulan Star Empire, is that it is canon, at least, from within STO, that there are several worlds that during the Romulan Civil War decided that they would be better off joining the Federation.
Yeah.
And basically telling the Romulan government to kiss off.
Yeah. So this is going to be a world that did that after, much later than what you're talking about, but, essentially the same thing. But instead of just joining the Federation, I think they're going to go independent. But in any case, it's mostly just a setting for you to get your orders. Abdul Rahim is asking me, are you doing this on purpose to make your mission usable for the top 3? Actually, it already is, even in its old current state, because this mission was up for, this mission series, actually, it's a 5-part series, was up for about 3 years. It was actually my first, part 5 was my first mission to break 1,000 plays. Took it a long time because, of course, no, it wasn't spotlighted or anything. So it actually didn't qualify for rewards until Dragoon played it. Because it had been, I had unpublished it because there were some broken things and things that I had started to work on again that, during those automatic republishes that we get, it would put up that mission in its actually uncompletable state, so that wouldn't be good. So yeah, Pex brings up a good thing in the chat room. He says putting a Romulan tag, or just ROM in brackets in front of your mission is a great way to, because in the top 3, what people will see is the title of your mission. They won't see that mission summary, so putting that up front is one clue to tell people that it's a mission for Romulan captains. I have done this on my KDF Romulan mission that I mentioned earlier. I also put in front of the very first dialogue that you see once you click on that button, I put in out-of-character text, "This is a mission for Romulan captains," just to kind of reinforce that.
Yeah, the launch of the top 3 system really kind of makes us reconsider a number of things we've done in the past with
yes, it does.
How we present missions.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I also have started doing with my missions, and since the top 3 came out, I know a number of people started doing this before that, is putting a little tag at the end of my missions, one last dialogue that says, thank you for playing, mission title and my author name. If you enjoyed this mission, here are others by the author, so that can even get people to kind of funnel people. If they like the mission, they can funnel people to the my missions that are not in the top 3 system. So I highly recommend people do that if they haven't already. All right, let's see. Mission reviews. Mark, I believe you have mission review.
Yes. As most people who play the game are aware, recently Cryptic completely revamped the Romulan storyline mission, or mission series, I suppose I should say, and took out a bunch of missions that used to be there, replaced them with other things, and some people decided that they wanted to recreate some of these removed missions. Well, one of those is, of course, the infamous Divided Impera mission, where you end up going and getting tricked into sabotaging a Romulan medical facility. Well, a person by the name of JohnnySnowball has made a recreation of Divided Impera called Divide et Impera Redux. And I played that one earlier today. One thing I noticed about that was kind of odd is that while it would seem as though the sort of thing that you would expect to be part of the top 3 system, it's not. I'm not sure why not, but it's not.
Well, he just released it, and I don't think it qualifies for rewards yet, right?
That's a possibility, yes.
Because it's got to qualify to be in the top 3.
Okay.
And
well,
I imagine possibly have a certain rating. I'm not sure.
Well, either way, though, is that it did actually have some stuff there. Not a lot, but I think it had 8 plays at the time I did it. Anyway, so as for the mission itself, yeah, you did a pretty good job of replicating, I guess you could say, the spirit of the original mission. You have an Undine, namely Admiral Zell, who gives you orders to go to this place and, mess up this research facility that was put together by the Romulans. And, you go through, you end up shooting a bunch of Romulans. Along the way, you find out that it's a Romulan institution focused primarily on medical research. However, they're researching Undine biology as one of the things they do there. Not necessarily the only thing, but one of the things they do there. Which is why the Undine infiltrator decided she wanted you to go there, is because, she wants the Romulans to stop researching Undine biology. So, that general thing carries through, although he did actually use the base maps, although he tinkered with them a lot, because unlike the original Divide at Impera, where you fly the vendor system, warp in, shoot several Romulan ships on your way to the station, and then board the station, he has an option where you can avoid the Romulan ships and beam down to the station without it actually attacking them. Which, of course, as everyone knows, isn't going to change the way things are later in the mission, because no matter how many ships you shoot on the first map, there's going to be the same number on the second map. Other changes is he added a bunch of ground assets to the station interior, because the original map had several very large open rooms where you could it's just like very big, wide open. And when he did his revamp thing, he partitioned those off to make several small rooms instead of one giant room. Because, well, let's face it, from a real-world perspective, some of the rooms that they had inside this Romulan space station were literally about the size of a football field. So he cut those into several smaller ones. You end up doing basically the same thing in his modified map, although he sticks in a few things to make it a bit different, such as you figure out before you get to the end of the mission that the person who sent you there did so under false pretenses, unlike the original where your character is scripted to, follow along with your orders until you get to the end where you find out that the person is an Undine, which wasn't really a surprise.
No, not with the old mission being probably one of the most famous missions in the game and being there for
famous
5 years.
Or infamous, one of the two.
One of the two.
Maybe both.
Yes, you can't be infamous without being famous, right?
One important difference in this one is that he did put in several, I guess you could say, branches in it that they're not really different objectives, but you have certain options as to how you accomplish the objectives. So, you know, when you find the Romulan station commander, you have the option to shoot her or attempt to talk her into helping you. Of course, it doesn't really make much of a difference. The only thing that really changes based on this is that there's like 1 or 2 groups of enemies that disappear from the map, I think. And, of course, you don't have to actually go to the trouble of fighting the station commander herself. Other things. One thing I noticed about this one he did that's actually a really, really cool trick is that when you have the long hallways, he does this scripted thing where when you step into the hallway, a patrol on a very fast route is triggered to spawn at the far end of the hallway and run towards you. And you'll see this little dialogue box pop up about how they're attacking intruders. And, you know, then they shoot you and you have to defend yourself. It was a neat touch that caught me by surprise the first time, but only the first time. One thing he did in the mission that was kind of odd, I don't really understand why he did this, is there are several things he sealed off with invisible walls that I don't really understand the purpose behind it, because one of them is this thing where it's a ramp that goes up to a door. He put invisible walls on the sides of the ramp, and as far as I can tell, they didn't really serve any purpose other than to make it more awkward to use the ramp. Because normally in missions like that, cryptic builds for things like this, when you have, you know, flat floor to the sides of a ramp, you can just jump up over the side of the ramp. But with the invisible wall there, you can't. Also, certain of the enemies on some of the maps are actually sealed behind an invisible wall prior to you reaching that location. And they're standing next to an objective. As soon as you walk near the objective, the invisible wall drops and the enemies attack you. And I didn't see anything you could do to avoid having that happen. So I'm not entirely sure why he decided to do it that way. Especially since it makes so that you can't do a proper assault because you have to get close to the enemies before the invisible wall drops. So what I ended up doing was doing the engineer thing. You drop your turrets, then you trigger the wall to drop, then you fight them. Still kind of weird, but eh. Let's see here. The other thing is that when he subdivided the station, he put in a bunch of walls and doors where, you know, you have to walk up to the door, push a button on a console to open the door, and these consoles are actually mission objectives, so that you're sealed into the part of the station that you start in, and you have to progress through the story to unlock the rest of the doors to go to the rest of the station. Which, honestly, is in some ways better than the original Cryptic mission, because in the original Cryptic mission, you could just walk around throughout the entire station, shoot all of the Romulans, then go back and do the story objectives. Actually, if I remember right, I think about it, there was more than just Romulans in the station. There were some of their allies. I think there was a Riemann squad, maybe a Herodian one too, in the station in the Cryptic version. Now, but anyways, at the end of it, of course, you end up having to fight the Undine boss, who, well, unlike the Cryptic original where you didn't actually KO the boss, In this one, you do KO the boss. However, you have this dialogue pop up about how the boss didn't really die and actually beamed out instead of dying. Unlike the original Cryptic mission, the space battle that follows this, you actually do have an option to track down the Undine Infiltrator and take them out. Whereas in the original, the Undine Infiltrator is on a cloaked Romulan ship that uses the distraction caused by the other Romulan ships attacking you to flee the system and get out of there before you have a chance to attack them. Overall, it was a very well done mission, and made a good use of the assets used in the original because, well, you know, the assets used as part of Divide and Impera are actually part of what was used for the original Foundry asset database. So, you know, that was, well...
all that old stuff from launch.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed in the mission that I'm really not sure about is when you're talking to the person that takes Zell's place, running around inside this space station with you, she makes a mention about how the vendor system is uninhabited. However, this is apparently the same star system that we saw to be inhabited by a race called the Vendorians in the TV show. And also, the Stowe version mentions that the planet Vendor 2 has a colony with several thousand Romulans. However, the Undine imposter thinks that Vendor is an uninhabited solar system. I'm not sure if that was something he did intentionally as a way of hinting that the person is an Undine imposter, or if it's just a mistake on his part. It's hard to be sure, really, because
it's a slightly obscure piece of information.
Yeah, well, people who didn't do the original Divide and Impera would never have seen the description of the solar system, because it's one of those system locations where the description of the system can't be seen unless you have a mission that specifically directs you to go there. And even then, it's only a story mission that will bring up the system information box, because, you know, the top three, as people have observed, they'll give you a little button to start the mission, but it won't give you the system information box associated with that map location. Well, one other thing is that when you look at the actual physical model of the planet in the Vendor system that the space station is orbiting, if you take a close look at it, you'll see on the surface of the planet what appear to be several large cities, which, well, the Romulan colony on Vendor 2 is a rather small one, so it would seem that this planet that the space station orbits is probably populated by Vendorians, because, you know, it's several large cities on several different continents, and a population of 47,000 Romulans seems inadequate to support such a large scale of construction. Yeah, well.
So this is sort of the first time we've had somebody take an old Cryptic mission and put it into the Foundry, now that it's gone from the actual game. What do you think is a good first effort in that regard?
Yes. I personally think that he did kind of go overboard redressing the ground map, but the result of it is actually very good mission, and his redress, if you didn't know what the original looks like, you probably wouldn't see it as overly cluttered. But, I did see the original. And I like actually some of the things he added to it, because there's this one group of Romulans that are standing around what looks like a Undine something contained inside a force field. And, they have whatever stuff that I guess they're scanning it and studying it. And you walk in, and then they decide they're going to shoot you, and, well, what happens from there. But, so, yeah, adding that thing in was actually a really cool touch, because it gives you kind of a sense that the Romulans were actually doing something there.
So one thing I kind of wanted to think about is part of the key thing about the loss of Divided Impera is that it was a mission that inspired a number of Foundry missions.
2 or 3 at least.
And I really do like the fact that JohnnySnowball has gone to the trouble of really polishing a lot of the mission itself, not just the maps and whatnot, but a lot of how things go down. At the same time, and this is purely a suggestion, I would like to see him maintain a few of the key elements of the original mission, specifically so that it can tie back into other Foundry missions that were made to be follow-ups to this.
Like Divide at Regnus, which, if I remember, it's a spotlight.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, he can't change that at the moment. Maybe he will be able to in the future, but...
Because the end result of the mission is more or less the same as the original. It's the way you go from point A to point B that was somewhat altered to be less dumb.
So does it still Zell end up being the Undine?
Well, okay. His version of it, one of the changes he made is that there's actually 2 Undine infiltrators. Zell and this other person who actually accompanies you to Vendor. You may or may not, depending on the choices you make, end up killing the other imposter, but Zell is still out there somewhere, because Zell was never in harm's way in the first place.
Okay, so but it's Zell is still
that is how,
to be.
yeah, and that is how it ends. The other one is that Zell is still out there.
Okay, all right.
But your question was going to be: is Zell outed as an Undine infiltrator in this one, like she was in the original?
Well, excuse me. You don't see Zell turn into an Undine. However, you uncover information that leads you to believe that she's an Undine because of the fact that she has you talk to this person who, at first glance, appears to be an intelligence agent, but, isn't really an intelligence agent, and everything the intelligence agent tells you is a complete lie. I mean, one of the things she tells you is that you're going there to rescue somebody else who had managed to find information that the Tal Shiar is building Thaleron weapons at this facility, which is actually the same, reason that Zell told you were going there in the first place, is that, Romulans were doing whatever there. And but in the new version, the other person says that they got it from a third party, and you're going there to rescue him. However, when you go there, you find out that he's not there and never was there, and that this actual Romulan space station is not actually even equipped to handle prisoners. So if they were to find a prisoner, they would immediately call the nearest military base and have the military base escort the prisoner off the facility, and they wouldn't keep them on site at all.
So I would say that
you get information that leads you to believe that Zell is an imposter simply because of the fact that Zell gave you the mission to work with this person, and unless this person was to somehow dupe Zell into it. But the way the mission's written, it makes it seem extremely unlikely that Zell didn't know what was going on.
So it sounds to me like Captain Hunter, who did the Spotlight, and Havraha, I know, who did at least one of the others, that are a sequel to Divide at Impera, could alter their mission description and say this is a sequel to Divide at Impera Redux by JohnnySnowball, with not too many modifications to their own mission to make it fit.
I would say if JohnnySnowball wanted to align it so that other sequel missions still line up, the key points to hit would be A, that Zell is outed as a Undyne, B, that she escapes into the Romulan Empire disguised as a Romulan. Because that's kind of the end result of the original, without going into any of the how they get there. Which, I mean, can be interpreted in any number of ways.
Well, the main difference here is actually that you never know where Zell was in the first place in this one. Because you basically get like a subspace communication from Zell telling you to pick up this person who is currently hiding inside Romulan territory at a small base that's primarily utilized by Orion pirates. Somewhere inside Romulan Star Empire territory. That was actually one of the things I forgot to mention earlier, is that unlike the original, where you go to Starbase 39, pick up Zell at Starbase 39, then go to Vendor directly, you get a communication from Admiral Zell over subspace radio to go to a different system, pick up the second person, then take the second person to Vendor. Which leaves it ambiguous as to where Zell is. Although, if you go to Starbase 39, you'll see Zell standing next to Admiral tonight. Anyways.
So before we move on, we actually have some breaking news. 2 pieces of breaking news, in fact, that were posted as we were speaking here tonight, this being Wednesday for any of you listening to the recording. So patch notes were posted for Thursday's patch, and it includes some Foundry notes. This is a huge patch, all kinds of fixes. So, for Foundry, resolved a crash that occasionally happened when swapping between a map and editing mode in the Foundry editor. So essentially going back to the editor from preview. I don't know if I had ever experienced that, but great. Crash fix. Awesome. Let's see. Added a Bluegill boss NPC group. Now, I wonder where they took this boss from. Is it from one of the story missions, or is it from the bug hunt?
I would guess that the only thing I can think of, because I've seen the Bluegill mobs in the Foundry, is that the only thing I could think of that would count as a boss is the Spawn Mother.
Yeah.
Well, we got that one that when they first show up in the, was it Dragon's Deceit?
Is there a sort of a boss one in that one?
Yeah, because you chase down the little, you chase down the little one, and then you fight the a boss with Enix to support you.
Well, yeah, but see here, the boss for that one, it's basically a very large Vadwar who tries to beat you to death with his bare hands.
Well, no, then you kill him, and then the big one comes out.
Yeah, that wasn't a particularly. I think that was a variation of what we already had in the Foundry.
Well, I guess we'll have to test it tomorrow and find out.
Yeah.
But also, there's some new NPC contacts added to the Foundry. D1 arthropods, which are scorpions. Rihan sailbacks. Ryzen feather monkeys. Ryzen lizards. Ryzen tropical birds. Snowmen, and Voth. For Voth, I assume that means some ground NPCs. Yeah, we can put the tropical birds on maps now as NPCs.
Wait, you said lizards?
Yes. This must be something that was that runs around the map, I guess.
Oh,
Yeah.
the little tiny Epo-sized things.
Yeah. Not big ones.
Oh, in case people are wondering what Rehand sailbacks are, it's kind of like one of the monster dog things, except it's more lizard-like, and it has this row of spines on it going down its back, hence the name sailback.
Yeah, it's from the new Romulus missions, right?
What does it mean by snowman? Does that mean like
huge snowman from Winter
snowman,
Event?
Or does
Yeah,
it
from the
mean like
Winter Event.
Okay, so it means the things that Q creates.
Yeah.
Yes. But it should be said that these are
contacts, not enemies.
Not combat mobs. Yeah, exactly.
Very much zero sense of humor working at work there, I'm sure.
I can't wait to see what people do with that, though. Hey, we could have used some of that in our in that Ice Cube mission that we played last week.
Oh, that would have been great.
How awesome would that have been if you start hallucinating snowmen everywhere?
That would have been the best.
Okay, that author needs to go back and modify now. Okay.
And a plug, if anyone missed it, go back and see the mission live play we did last week.
Yes, we had so much fun with that. Okay, so the other piece of news is that let's see here. On February 17th, Captain Smirk made a tweet. He said, "I need to get a list of UGC authors who want to volunteer to get awesome Foundry coverage and endorsement." We didn't really know what that meant, I think, at the time. And then he actually, there was a Foundry thread that was created about that, asking what's going on. And so he just posted in there a little bit ago and said, "I will be making everything I have planned public knowledge soon. In the meantime, if you are a UGC author who wants to promote your missions, get your trailers polished, your descriptions ready, and your missions published before the end of April. I will be promoting a great new initiative to bring attention to the Foundry, and I want to share that opportunity with our talented UGC authors. Stay tuned for more info in the coming weeks."
Oh, there is one thing in here that it's not labeled a Foundry fix, but if it's what I think it is, it will actually change the way Foundry costumes work too. Because, as you may have noticed, when my character originally sat down, that little half a cape thing that she wears was kind of like floating in mid-air next to her, and it didn't actually lay flat when she sat down. The patch notes include a fix that was discussed on the forums by, I think it was Jojing, about how they're changing the way that the cloth things that hang and flap like that work, so that they, don't do that. And that will most likely affect the way that the Foundry costumes that utilize those assets work.
This should pretty much affect any draping material that the costumes
so on
use.
any of the NPCs or any of the costumes that we can create that utilize the hanging cloth. But I don't know, what do you guys make of this thing that Smirk is talking about?
I think he specifically asked for trailers, which, I don't know, means he may be putting together some kind of a post or a guide.
Hard to say.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say at this point. I mean, it's probably something outside the game, something on the website maybe?
Yeah, because I can't really visualize putting trailers inside the game. But, I mean,
how cool would it be if you
something
could?
on the ARC thing, maybe.
I heard somebody one time come up with the idea of putting a theater on Earth Space Dock that would show episodes of the series that you could go with your player and sit down there and watch. How cool would that be for Foundry trailers? No, I'm sure that would be very difficult to do, but I thought it was funny. But yeah, I think it'll probably be on the website or something. But still, could be something cool. We'll kind of have to wait for more details, but obviously if you want some exposure, get your stuff ready. And we'll wait and see what he has in mind. So we've got a tech topic that we would like to do for you.
You have to give me a sec here to switch over to the Foundry.
Yeah. Dragoon's going to switch over to the Foundry. I came up with the idea to do this because of one of the missions that I played for the new mission strike team that we started, which is designed to help people get some plays for their brand new missions. Let me see, what was the mission? The mission was Exitus Acta Probat, Part 1 by Lazara. And I liked the mission very much. I think I gave it 4 stars. It was a very fun mission. And the only real quibble I had with it is that he had sort of an introductory map that was very short. It was just a couple lines of dialogue, and then you were off to the next load screen. So this is a prime candidate for doing one of those, I call them in-map transitions, where you essentially trigger a transition from, in this case, a space map, from one star system to another, but you do it without, in the same map, so that you can avoid a load screen, so that you can have a little bit of dialogue, warp out, warp in to another system, and keep going. So we're going to teach you how to do that as soon as Dragoon is ready.
I'm just about ready here.
Dragoon knows this technique, so he can kind of guide us through it. Since obviously I can't see what he's seeing without a delay on it.
Got it loaded up. Basically, I'm starting out by just throwing down the objectives we're going to need. We're going to need a go to warp with some kind of interact. And then we're going to need a reach marker. To exit warp. We're going to need a space map. Custom. Place our reach marker. And so one of the key differences you'd say is that it's basically going to end up becoming 2 system maps in one. So it kind of one of the key things is that you got to be able to keep track of what belongs in which system, because everything is going to overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Another key thing is that this is so much easier if you set your triggers as you go versus waiting till the very end.
Yes.
You have to sort out what is what. I speak from
also from the discussions we had about this type of thing previously, this is one of those situations where you want to be very methodical when you name objects as you place them down, because having 20 different, say, space station pieces, where 10 of them are part of map A and 10 are part of map B, and you don't know which is which, that makes for difficult map editing. So if you name each of them to correspond to which stage of the map that they're part of, it makes it easier for you to modify it after you place things on the map.
So you name A, Planet 1, B, Moon 2, things like that. Just to keep it something to keep it straight in your head. If you're going for really, really complicated stuff on each map.
What I actually tend to do is I'll come up with like a prefix for all of my assets so I can keep track of which system, what goes in which system. So for instance, let's call, I'm trying to think of a unique name for a system. Call it the Modos system. So I'll come up with the prefix Modos. Let's see if I got any planetoids in here. That'd be kind of nice. Okay, so not a fancy map. Let's go ahead and set the triggers, and I put down my objectives so that I'd have a constant to go through. So the moto system is going to disappear when we trigger the objective completes go to warp. That's nice and easy. And I'm going to add in a beacon. So the kind of one of the tricks is that we need to get the user into a specific spot. So I'm going to go ahead and use a beacon. Preferably the effect without the that's also going to disappear once we get a warp. Let's just call it. Don't need to be that far out. As a general rule, you want to put your warp out point some distance away, so you have a general idea of which direction their player is going to be coming from. Okay, so we've got our motive system all complete, and everything will disappear once we go to warp. But we need the warp effect, and the asset we need for the warp effect is Starstreak. I'm going to use the north to south version. Odds are I'm not going to get this right on the first try, but
well, that's why we test. One thing that's worth mentioning is because you're going to be transitioning from one star system to another, as far as the player is concerned, but we have no ability to change backdrops in the middle of a map. What you're going to want to use is a fairly generic backdrop, maybe just a star field or maybe one of the sector spaces that has just a little wispy bit of nebula in it. Just, something that works for both systems.
Yeah. There's actually something that you see in some of the cryptic missions. They actually do have the ability to change the sky file itself, which we can't do that.
I think it's a pretty recent ability, too, because I think what it was, the first time they used it was...
the Worf mission.
Oh, that one... Yeah, the one where you're running around with Worf in the Dyson Sphere.
Sphere of Influence.
Sphere of Influence.
Well, they have displayed a more limited ability to do things along those lines in the past, because with some of the older cryptic missions, you're not actually going to another map. You're going to like a far-flung reach of the current map, and when you do that, you know what? I'm not sure how much different the sky looks when you do those. Now that I think about it again. Oh.
All right, so I've set the my star streaks to appear when the go to warp objective is complete, and to disappear when the exit warp objective is complete. I've gone ahead and done that for just this one, so I can copy paste and create a nice trail of them. That's probably more than enough. Don't want to.
As we record this, Tumor Boy is asking on Twitter what space stations we have available in the Foundry right now.
A couple of old Federation ones, one Romulan, 2 Klingons, and that Ryza one that is now the Treasure Trading Station. And then
we do have a couple that are kind of labeled as satellites that actually are space stations. Like I think one of them is the one that they use for.
Isn't the thing that orbits Vulcan available as a Foundry asset?
Not sure.
No.
No, it's not. Oh.
Okay, there's something that's similar to it. It's very similar to it.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I might go grab a bunch of screenshots for him once we're done here.
Yeah.
I think that might just be simpler.
Since you're already in.
No, I mean once the show's done. Okay, so all that's well and good. Go ahead and grab my reach marker.
So what you've done is you've placed the stars in a line between, essentially going to be between your 2 objectives here.
Yes.
Between the warp out objectives, which leaves the first system, and the warp in objective, which enters the second system.
All right. Okay. Oh, not 20. 20 is way too much. 5 is enough. Something else I tend to do is I like to put invisible walls around. I think, but they're a little tricky to get right. I definitely recommend the invisible wall tall. But the trick is the origin point is actually at the very bottom of the wall, so you have to lower it. And I wish I remembered how tall these things actually are, because they're not infinite. There's a specific height to them. And unfortunately, I cannot remember what that height is, so I'm just going to put it at -20 and hope it's enough. Again, always good to set your triggers before you go duplicating an object a bunch of times. And one of the nice things is that because... How far apart are we doing this? Oh, so we're only doing about 6, so that's more than enough. As we now have invisible floors. Yay! Which unfortunately are not nearly as big.
Well, you can't expect to have everything your way, can you?
Alright, well I'm not going to worry about the invisible floors right now. But the walls are there to kind of keep people from veering off too far off path. Okay. All right, am I forgetting? Oh, yes. Okay, so we got all those in place. And now we're going to add in our new system. So let's put a nice Class M planet in there. Something that they'll warp right into. And this is going to be The Drogan system.
Did you just name that after me?
I totally did.
Nah.
And that is going to here after the exit warp is complete. And just for good measure, let's throw a station in there. There's one of those stations. Oh, Mark, that's the similar but not quite the same station. And this is...
Oh, I actually can't see it because the Twitch video stream is glitched out on my end.
Yeah, mine's been glitchy all night. But I do see what you're looking at. You're one of the things that's labeled as a satellite, which isn't really a satellite.
No, it's not. But oh well. I will worry more about what it is and less about what it's named. All right. Did I set that? Nope, I didn't set that. All right. So let's go give this a shot. So I don't see anything. Makes me wonder what in the world I messed up.
Did you accidentally set things to be hidden until the mission completes?
Yeah.
Did you go back to your objectives and actually...
That could be. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Didn't actually set them to... Yeah.
I add my beacon as the interact for...
Actually, you know what? That reminds me. There was one person on the forum who was discussing a glitch they had with one of their missions. Or maybe it was in the chat channel sometime this week. One of the two. They were discussing a glitch they had with one of their missions where if you didn't have any actual objectives on a map, it wouldn't play pop-up dialogues correctly.
Yeah, that's been that way forever. All right, there we go. Okay, so we've got our moto system, and we can see our target, which I forgot should have renamed as warp out point or something. And we're at warp. Yay!
This is a good object lesson for authors that even veterans like Greendragoon can occasionally forget to do things.
Oh, and then we come out of warp to the broken system with our very lovely star basin planet.
Yeah, there you go.
If you want to spruce things up a little bit, let's name the beacon to warp out point. And I'm also going to adjust the interact a little bit, choose an animation, and do a Federation warp out.
Yep, that's always a good touch.
I wish we could do that flash that they do when Cryptic does an exit warp effect. Even if we can't change the sky file.
Mm-hmm. It's sort of I don't know, almost like a depth of field kind of a thing. Or no, that's not what.
Yeah,
that's
it's kind of like a depth of field thrown with like a very bright flash.
Depth of focus. That's what I'm thinking of. Depth of focus.
Well, you could theoretically trigger a Q flash animation, but that doesn't look quite the same.
Not quite.
I know some people end their warp outs with a exit warp interact instead of a reach marker.
That's what I tend to do. And then, it's always good to have a pop-up dialogue or something that says, "We have arrived at the acceptance system, sir," just to reinforce it. But, using this, you can have this kind of first little bit where you could get some intro and have some dialogue with the bridge officers, get a little bit of a briefing, and then you warp to the next system without without having to have a load screen. And, if you have a mission with a whole bunch of maps, that frees up a map to do something else with.
Let's try your... unfortunately, I don't think I can swap it out without breaking all of my triggers. But either way, I think everyone gets the gist of it.
Yeah. And, there's lots of different variations of this that you can do. I mean, I've had ones where I've warped between 3 different systems and just in one map. I've had ones where you actually treat the space map. This is a technique I learned from Ceridium. You treat the space map as sector space, essentially. And you go to one location, do a warp-in trigger, spawn a bunch of planets and stuff, and you're in one star system. You do something there, then you trigger a warp-out animation, despawn all that stuff, move on to the next location, do the same thing over and over again. How I've got it in my mission is that you're actually searching several different star systems for something.
Which can be a very cool effect, but be very tricky as you basically are creating like 4 or 5 different systems on top of each other.
Yes.
Plus the sector space itself.
And you got to make each one feel unique. So, use different colored nebulas, use different planets, because obviously you can't change the backdrop.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, that's a good point. Is that with the nebulas, you can kind of fake changing the backdrop by positioning the nebulas so that you're not inside them, but you can, see them in the distance.
Absolutely.
I know I've used a dense, gassy asteroid field to kind of cover the fact so it really feels like you are in a different location.
And should be mentioned that, this kind of technique to avoid map transitions can be used on ground maps as well. Using triggers, you can essentially change the whole map around. I've had ones where let's see, what did I do? Well, I kind of showed the technique on here. It was building a map inside a map, where you essentially transition, in this case using a transporter, from one map to another, and you just despawn it around yourself so the original cryptic map is now visible.
Yeah. And of course, there's a whole trick with the holodeck too, where we actually have the fading holodeck asset and stuff.
We do. That one can be kind of tricky though, because you got to make sure that. Let's see. Did you figure out how to spawn the holodeck asset without pushing the player out of the way?
Yes, because the fade-in holodeck asset has no is no collision.
Oh, that's.
So what you do is you throw up a bunch of indivisible walls to act as the collision for the holodeck.
There you go. Well, I may have to go and redo some of my holodeck mission.
Well, one thing that I've thought of is that I've seen some things where people would basically spawn entire buildings on a ground map that it's not really, you're not changing the entire map, and it's a very large scale version of doing triggers to rearrange things, but it's not quite the same as a map inside a map because you're rearranging a large chunk of the map and not the whole thing. And the player is actually able to see that it's not the whole thing.
I see what you're saying. Is you're altering parts
I guess
of the map rather than the whole.
It just occurred to me. I just remember this one mission where you're basically doing this archaeological expedition, and you trigger this building complex to literally rise out of the ground. So you come down this is, rather boring ground map with not much on it. Then you do something, and this huge building complex pops up. And the way they did it in that mission, they actually kind of took it wasn't a single building, it was one of the large building complex assets, and it was just like stuck like 5 or 6 of them in the same spot at slightly different altitudes, and triggered them so that each time you completed one of the mission objectives, it would rise up out of the ground a little bit.
I remember one that's kind of similar to what you're saying, except it actually sank down into some water, I believe, before we actually had water assets.
You're talking about Alimax,
yeah,
the mains of Belnar Moon. Which you totally wouldn't have to do that way now that we have a water asset.
And only, like 3 years too late?
Yeah. This reminds me of behind the scenes for Stargate SG-1, where they were showing they had this entire set that was built in a pool that could be raised and lowered the entire set to make it look like the water was rising. Yeah.
I remember exactly the episode you're probably talking about.
It's actually pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems very backwards when you think about it, though.
Well, I mean, if you ever watched the behind the scenes information about the original Outer Limits and Twilight Zone, how they did the practical effects for that show, that they're effects that people would nowadays use stuff like CGI for, but back then it was literally like smoke and mirrors that they did for some of these things.
Well, and obviously smoke and mirrors is definitely what we have to do in the Foundry for a lot of things. Well, I think, guys, that's a good place to end it for the evening. So, Dragoon, why don't you throw up our contact info?
Okay. We can be reached by email at foundryroundtable@live.com. We can be also found on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. No LE there. Drogan can be reached at Drogan1701. Mark here can be reached at Markhawkman. And I can be reached at Greendragoon.
Excellent. Well, good night, everyone, and happy foundrying tomorrow with some new assets.
Good night.
Good night.